more so the present. Today we are gathered as an audience with Charlotte Church, a fantastic singer-songwriter, actress and TV presenter who's eager to take part in what will hopefully be a lively discussion. This session is in partnership with the Arts Council for Wales, and I hope that you all thoroughly enjoy. I'd now like to hand over to Phil George.
Diolch yn fawr. Wel, prynu da bawb. I'm the chair of the Arts Council of Wales, and it's a delight to be introducing Charlotte and to open up this conversation today about culture and democracy. Charlotte Church's story is in many ways so familiar that we forget how extraordinary it is, how extraordinary she is. Her journey as a singer alone has been remarkable, from child angel to crazy pop chick to indie experimenter. But she's also been a successful entertainment presenter on Channel 4, an actor, a Guardian columnist, and a presenter of documentaries on subjects like mental health and homelessness. And perhaps most interestingly, at this festival of events looking to the future of our society and democracy in Wales, she's been right at the heart of public debate. Her experience of press intrusion and distortion led to her involvement in the Leveson inquiry. She has campaigned against austerity policies and on climate change. She has hosted pub debates to rekindle face-to-face argument, so there's no threat to her in this session today. And then there's her views on the arts. At the Arts Council, we share Charlotte's vision of a society where artistic experience is central, not a bit of icing on the cake, for all, and not just for a privileged minority, where creativity builds well-being, social cohesion, and economic resilience. We see it as belonging at the heart of our health and education services, and we're working to mainstream the arts and artists in those very places. So it's a delight to have the opportunity to talk about these things with Charlotte. She's always been gutsy, not, as she says, a natural diplomat, unafraid of controversy. And I don't expect anything different today. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you, Phil.
Charlotte, people say always that talent is everywhere, but that opportunity and access are not. Let's talk about your entry point into the performing arts as a child. How did that opportunity open up for you?
So, I mean, in a way, it was embedded in the culture of my family because we're all singers. I had lots of cabaret singers in my family, my Auntie Caroline, my cousin Linda, loads of them. So they'd go round on the weekends doing the work in men's pubs and clubs all over the valleys and in Cardiff and the Vale. So it was part of the fabric of our family. So whenever we had a family party, we'd never hire a DJ because everybody just sang. Yeah, so I think it was sort of embedded into my family life how important singing was. And as soon as I, you know, started to be able to squawk a few notes, everybody was like, she can do it as well!
But there was this mix as well, because it wasn't just the clubs and the pubs and the cabaret singing, but you were in church as well, because there's a Catholic side of the family. So,
yeah, there's a Catholic side of the family, but that wasn't super musical, to be fair. It was, it was quite dreary.
But lots of performance going on.
No, not really. Okay. Not in the church that we went to. Yeah. So yeah, I think it was that. But I mean, obviously, my break came as a complete fluke, really. I mean, I got a scholarship to the Cathedral School as a girl chorister, and that taught me a lot about music and singing and choral music. And that was amazing, but I didn't fit in there at all. I was from a really working class family, and I got bullied a lot for being poor. We had a car, a really clapped out old Fiesta called Betsy, and none of the doors open from the inside. So every morning I'd have to climb out of the boot to let my mother out of the door. So I got absolutely slayed for that. And it was because the cathedral school had longer holidays that there was this talented kids phone in on this morning. Oh. And I phoned into that and sang Pia Jesu over the phone. Yeah. And sort of lots of stuff
Everything came from that?
Yeah, it just sort of fell into place from that then. And I had a record deal when I was 12, and it was a complete whirlwind then for the next, well, 20 years.
You survived it pretty well.
Yeah, sort of. I got some scars.
A few bruises on the way.
But it all makes you more resilient, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we all remember that time, which was in some ways surrounded by some disgusting press activity, when you moved out of the childhood phase of your life as a performer and became a young woman performer. And you've talked a lot about that kind of distorting sexualization and the pressures on you. But also, you were exploring new kinds of musical expression, or at least new to us in the public. You were probably always involved with it. But we had you with this fluting, lovely, high soprano sound, and now suddenly you were this kind of crazy chick singing quite raunchy pop music. Yeah. Where was your creativity in that? Were you in there, or was that mainly production?
I was in there. I started to... I mean, obviously, so when I was a kid, they were all covers that I did. However, I was really heavily involved in the arrangement and orchestration of stuff. And even though it wasn't my own original material, it was a very creative environment to be in. I was going and singing and recording with orchestras all over the world. I got to work with James Horner on A Beautiful Mind soundtracks, recording in a soundstage in LA with 120 strong orchestra. So I got to do all sorts of incredible things. I had some amazing opportunities afforded to me. And then when I started writing when I was like 16, and I suppose my change was really just about, I just wanted to feel relevant to my peers. I felt really isolated, and I was being sold as this sort of angelic child, of which I definitely wasn't anymore. And so had a serious rebellion against that. So I went and I worked with all sorts of different songwriters, in America, in Atlanta and Nashville and LA, and also in the UK, and then when I had it, you know, some of the songs, I listen back to it now and I'm like, oh God, it's dreadful. But it was my first try, my first attempt, and and then when I brought it back to the label were like, it's all right, you know, but we'll slap a few hits on it and then it'll be fine. And I was crestfallen. Yeah. I was absolutely heartbroken that my first attempt at, you know, really creating something that was more of me was like, it's all right, but we'll just, you know, slap a couple of these things on there. So Crazy Chick and Call My Name and the singles and stuff had nothing to do with me at all. Right. That was just a complete vehicle.
That's the machine.
That's the machine. That's the sausage factory. And I just went along with it because I didn't feel like I had very much autonomy or power within that, and you know there was market forces at stake. Of course. And you know I'd made the record company a lot of money in the past, and so you get sort of caught up in all of that stuff. But it didn't take long for me to get out of that. Which I was like, this is nonsense. I'm not going to be a part of this. But yeah, I had to wait a couple of years when to really start to understand how I was being manipulated, you know, and used.
And all the things you've been through and all the pressures you've been exposed to, you've kept that inner creative flame alive because, you know, in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, we've seen a lot of your more experimental work. We've seen the kind of indie stuff you've done. We've seen that kind of almost hippie feel to it, and the kind of stuff that Griff does also. It has a relationship with that kind of remarkably strong Welsh tradition, actually, of exploring the folky and other ends of the spectrum. That's been important to you, to sustain that autonomy.
Well, I think that as soon as I sort of got myself free of the system, I was much freer to explore, and the people, and obviously the people who you meet around that time really influence you. And I met my husband around that time, and he just had an encyclopedic knowledge of music, and so then I started listening to all sorts of different music because I'd been quite narrow before then. I'd listened to sort of popular opera and classical stuff and R&B, hard, R&B constantly. Yeah. And so it just sort of broadened my horizons. And then, and then I started working with local musicians and songwriters, and it wasn't necessarily about going to work with these fancy producers in different places all over the world. It was like, okay, no, there's talent here. Let's experiment, really. Let's throw all the rules out of the window. And then it was such a wonderful process of experimentation and creativity, and it was just a very wonderful and wondrous sort of process of discovery, really. Well,
it's terrific you've come out the other side with a sausage machine.
Yeah.
Able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's something that we all need to hold on to. You've had a major international profile for a long time, and I suppose we'd all like to know from your experience how important are arts and culture for Wales's profile in the world, because I've got skin in the game, as chair of the Arts Council. It's my job to tell people that it's hugely important for our international profile. But what's been your experience of that? Is it?
You mean what is my experience of Wales' standing in the world?
Is recognised
No.
because of arts and culture?
No. I think it's in my experience, and this is, a while ago,
No.
But, for instance, when I did George Bush's inauguration, he asked me what state Wales was in, so he didn't, and that's more about his intellect probably than anything else. But, everywhere I went, Wales just wasn't known. Everybody knows Scotland and Ireland and England, but, Wales just wasn't very known, and I think there's so much that we could sell ourselves on. This whole idea of Wales as the land of song is ancient and deep, and it's really at the core of us. And I don't think we lean on that enough. If Ireland had that tenet, oh my gosh, the whole world would know about it. They'd do it brilliantly.
Because they've got a big diaspora, because their population was spread.
Of course. Yeah. But I think Festival of Voice did a really good job of sort of starting to rekindle these ideas of Wales as this land of song, but also to hear international voices. So to make it much more of an open forum for all sorts of different voices to be heard and different styles of music. But I think this idea of Wales as the land of song is really, really powerful. And in a way, it's almost like we shy away from it because it's not cool. Or
it feels conservative and hidebound.
But I think things like that's starting to change because well-being is such a buzzword, and that's what so many people are talking about, well-being and creativity. And I think this idea of the land of song can really sit beautifully within that.
People finding their voice.
Absolutely, but I think that. Finding our voice as a nation, what is our soul? What do we want to say? What have we got to say? We've got so much to say, but we don't have the conversations, the big public conversations. I think we're starting to more and more now, and this is what these sorts of GWLAD is about. But I think we need to decide as a nation what we want to say to the world and who we want to be. And I think we have the opportunity, because we're such a small nation, we can testbed some really wonderful things that are, all wrapped up in ideas of raising everybody up and how we live, having well-being and creativity weaved through the entirety of society, living in a much more sustainable fashion. I think I think that this is what's going to happen across the world anyway, and it's going to happen really, really quickly. And I think if Wales can be a first adapter of those sorts of ideas, like things with I always get this name wrong, the well-being of future generations Act. You know, the first type of legislation,
which is such a groundbreaking piece of legislation.
It is a groundbreaking piece of legislation, exactly. But that's the point. Like, don't just pay it lip service. This isn't about just going, oh look, we've got this amazing piece of legislation, but actually nothing ever goes through those processes that it should. So I think that we're really at a tipping point, like the rest of the world, to really start to question why, to really start to get deeper and deeper and question why things are the way they are and how do we want it to be, because we have got this opportunity, we've got technology, you know, and also in Wales, because we've been lacking in so much in terms of funds and infrastructure, in a way, in the future, that might play to our strengths. Because actually, all of this technology and stuff which is being developed now, we can start to put those things in, whereas, you know, places and cities which are already really well established are going to have to retrofit lots of this stuff. So
a small nation can be light on its feet, can be a crucible, a modelling of change.
Absolutely, but also I think because, you know, again, things like our poverty rates are so high, there are a lot of complicated issues in Wales.
And it's crushing. Exactly,
but I think in a way, you know, when your chips are down, and for a long time, Wales, our chips are down, do you know what I mean?
And chips are on the ground. Yeah.
Totally, but I think there is an opportunity to really lift everybody up here.
I want to come back to that poverty issue afterwards. Let's carry on with that theme of the arts in the centre of everyday life. You talked about it in relation to well-being and education. In everybody's minds in the room will be your interest in creative learning, because it's been all over the press. Now, as you know, we are running a major 5-year programme with the Welsh Government. And if people don't know about it, then it's a crying shame. It's called Creative Learning Through the Arts. And the OECD says it's world-leading. We get visited, you know, at schools in the Rhondda and in Cardiff West by the Lego Foundation, because we're seen as leading the world in creative learning through the arts. In 577 Welsh schools, artists have been working in maths, science, languages, history, geography to open up new ways of learning. And it's transformative, and it changes achievement in literacy and numeracy as well. So creative learning is something the Arts Council is completely committed to in partnership with the Welsh Government. Now, Charlotte has got a really strong vision for creativity in learning, and that's why you want to set up this school. Now, today, I don't want to get into planning inquiries and problems with neighbours.
It's a snowfest.
But let's talk about creativity in learning and what your vision of that is.
So the school that I'm trying to set up, the Awen Project, hopes to be a charity that helps to set up schools. So the first thing that we're going to do is set up a school. And the ideas, it'll be free to attend, creative and democratic. There are sort of 3 central principles. And, well, there's 4 actually, because it's all about co-creation and co-construction. So I think a lot... I mean, we've got the new Successful Futures curriculum coming in, which is wonderful, and Wales is really looking very progressive in terms of education. But I would argue that what tends to happen with this idea of creativity, which is such a buzzword, you know, it's all over industry, it's what everybody wants in the workforce, it's in education, it's everywhere. But I think we tend to tag it on at the end like it's some sort of, oh, let's learn about this and then we'll draw a picture. You know, and a lot of the time it's within the realms of the arts, where creativity, I think we need to start redefining what creativity actually is, because when you think about it on a moment-by-moment basis, you are literally creating everything that's happening around you. You are improvising the words that you're saying. That is an act of creation. Everything that we do, really, if you start to really boil it down. And so I think that creativity should be embedded in every process that we have. So for us and the kids who are building this school, we allow them to be a part of all of the processes. So rather than, so for instance, when they first got into the classroom, there was nothing in there. There was no furniture, there was nothing in there. And so part of what they have to do is go, okay, well, what do we need? What do we want? What does the classroom look like? What do we want our classroom to look like? And then, and all of that starts to shape conversation about, well, what do we want to learn? Well, okay, well, you know, we sort of need to know what we want to learn to know what stuff we need. And so all of these different processes start to just blossom, and all of these conversations and all of this peer-to-peer learning through the process of actual embedding creativity right at the very start of every process. Yeah. They are making their own rules, their own sort of constitution on how they should behave with each other, what sort of community they want to build, how they'll enforce rules, or will they enforce them? Will they even write rules down because then they need to be sanctioned? So all of these really interesting conversations start to happen when kids are a part of the process of creating their own school.
This is central to the kind of citizens they'll become, because they won't be passive observers of politics. They'll be makers of their world. This is why central to democracy.
Absolutely, and it's a lot on the themes of, again, these are things which are happening all over the world. This isn't, you know, this isn't brand new. No. These ideas of participatory democracy, so that citizens start to be in control of some funds of government to create the stuff that they need. So that actually the users of systems, whether that be in health, whether it be for social stuff within the community,
procurement of services locally.
Exactly. So people start to be part of the creative process of creating that stuff, but also of just, you know, deciding how it looks. All of those creative processes embedded right from the start. And again, I think that Wales can be a world leader in this sort of stuff because we've got such a small nation. We can be quite close to government. You know, the Westminster is everybody's far away, and this is part of the problem of what we're facing at the moment with the B word, and is that people feel completely so far away from the process. And I think in Wales we could be much closer to government and these processes, and have much more ownership over what we create.
It's a visionary position, and it's exciting. You will hear the huge silent wail of scepticism about it.
Of course.
All around us, because every time we talk about creative learning, people say, well, you know, but what we need is skills and tools like literacy and numeracy. And the notion that creativity is the root to those is sometimes very hard to express and to sell to people. I was interested the other day, looking at what Andreas Schleicher has said at the OECD. He's the man behind the PISA test. Yeah. And he now says, I made a huge mistake. I left out creativity. Yeah. And the result of that is that we're building a generation of young people who are being fitted for the widget-making world, which won't exist.
Totally.
And so top-down teacher-instructor people is not the future. The future is collaborative learning, problem-solving together. My goodness, that's a hard message to sell out there in the streets.
It is a hard message to sell. However, it's happening all over the world, and the science and the data is really clear on it, that actually you embed creativity and everything is raised up, and well-being as well. Because arts and creativity has a huge impact on people's mental health and well-being. When people's mental health and well-being is better, then they tend to be able to function properly and therefore do maths and English.
And learn.
Yeah, if you're ridden with anxiety and feeling depressed as a teenager, and we've got a mental health epidemic in this country amongst our young people, then you're not going to want to work. Yeah.
And anyway, the most exciting creative learning experiments have incorporated attention to certain skills, haven't they? Yeah. They make sure you construct a challenge sometimes that encourages people to develop certain skills, and they will anyway if they're problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. So I think all of that comes along and follows within. And I'm not saying you don't do it to the detriment of course, we want everybody to be literate and numerate and you know, have a base knowledge of science. This isn't just about developing soft skills. Of course, it has to come with the knowledge base as well, and you keep building your knowledge base as you build your skills. But, you know, we do know from the world of work that you know, automation is going to change everything. We're not quite sure how, but all of the human skills, creativity being probably the most human thing, are going to be absolutely essential to people's ability to get work. But also, I think another tenet of creativity, which is completely essential, is that people can't be creative unless they feel that they have a voice. So first of all, they need to feel like, and for people to have a voice, they need to feel listened to. To being heard. To being heard. So the more people are heard, and the more we all really, as a society, truly learn to listen to what people are saying, then the more people feel heard, and then the more they actually have a voice, and then the more they can be creative with that voice. And democracy has a big part to play in that.
And these days, as we all know, that hearing is often done in an echo chamber of bias confirmation. So I talk to the people, or I'm heard by the people who agree with me.
Yeah.
And you're always interested, hence the pub debate idea, in trying to open up real face-to-face dialogue again. That's quite hard, because one of the things that strikes me about, you know, I think of the communities I come from. I'm a Valleys boy, and the world I came from had lots of local institutions that hosted that process.
Yeah.
There were unions that developed education and ideas about society. There were institutes, Workmen's Institute, Workers' Education Association. There were churches and chapels that sometimes were places not of repression and dogma, but of argument and debate. And we've lost those in large measure. How do we recreate that civic dialogue again?
I mean, I started this idea of pub politics, and the idea was that you know, it's sort of off the back of, you know, people are tired of experts, and which is a ridiculous thing to say. However, there is an element of truth to it, and so yeah, it was about taking it back into the places where people go, where people are, where they're having fun, and making it something that's that's really fun, and that is for normal people to debate and discuss, and start to hone their skills in that, start to get good at it, you know, rather than just watching it on Question Time or watching it in the political sphere, because it's not really in the political sphere. Like, I cannot stand watching the stuff in Westminster. I mean, I do watch it, but it drives me up the wall, because it's not a conversation, their way in which of speaking. Nobody answers any questions, and it's just not real. It's got so far away from, you know, practical, purposeful dialogue on how we implement change and how we make things better, that I think that the only way for it to happen now is for the people to do it. And not in a revolutionary sort of way, in a sort of fourth industrial revolution sort of way.
An active citizen way.
So there's a really interesting economist called Jeremy Rifkin, and he talks about how we're going to save the world, and it's all about collaboration and networks of partnerships between people having a much more active part in their communities. And the thing is that these sorts of changes benefit us on so many levels. You know, in terms of social isolation, which is becoming a problem because of social media, but social isolation of the elderly as well.
Loneliness.
Exactly, loneliness. All of these issues, as soon as we start to reform these communities, which are through things like participatory democracy, where you give people meaning and purpose, because it's not like you know, the world is fixed and there's not a great deal to do. Oh, well, the robots are coming, automation's coming, so nobody's going to be able to find any meaning and purpose because all the problems in the world are fixed. It's fine. You know, there's a lot to sort out. And there are a lot of people out there who don't have meaning and purpose.
I was reading an article in The Guardian this week by a really good, sharp writer, and he was saying that there's a huge amount of evolution of new forms of political and social engagement going on. Yeah. And people developing participatory democracy locally. And it's completely under the radar of the way the media reports, because the media reports established democratic institutions and what the elected politicians say. Yeah. And all this activity is under that radar, and it's emerging. You pick up some of it, you pick up stuff like the Preston experiment in local sourcing of services and products and so on. But there's a lot going on and emerging which is not being captured. And I suppose the challenge is to all our major institutions. When I came into post as chair of the Arts Council, I said, we've got to become more visible, more porous, more transparent. We've got to be out there working with people in communities and more open to their critique and in dialogue with them. Because if we're just seen as some distant funder of arts activity, we're going to die. Yeah. And that's a challenge to us all, a challenge to broadcasters, challenge to our democratic institutions. And yet those institutions have strength as well, because there are systems behind them which have been proven over time and which are democratically ensured. So how do we stop getting into a mess with all this participatory stuff?
I think that we, as Art Council Wales have done, we make sure it's diverse. We make sure that we're asking everybody. There's this idea called deep democracy, which isn't that, you know, everybody has a voice, and because what ends up happening in that is that some people speak louder than others, and some people are quite comfortable and quite confident in sharing their opinion often, and some people just aren't, and some people don't understand. And so a deep democracy is the idea of really coaxing it out of people that actually there is, by listening and making sure we hear absolutely everybody, that's where all the answers lie. The answers don't lie in a democracy where, you know, the loudest people are always heard. So I think part of that is about diversity. And yes, of course, within our public institutions, there is still so much value and strength. But I would also argue that we do have to be very adaptable now. This is an evolutionary thing. This is about survival of the fittest, and the fittest isn't about being the most toned or physical. It's about your ability to adapt. And this is what technology is making us do. Everything's coming really, really fast. And personally, I think that that's part of the reason why there's an anxiety epidemic, is because everything is just becoming really, really, really fast. And so we have to be much more fluid and much more creative, but much more comfortable in a liminal space. I love this. So a liminal space is the idea of a transitionary phase where there's quite a lot of chaos. But it's a process of which you will emerge, but to be in the liminal space, you have to be sort of quite comfortable and be able to hold yourself within something that's quite chaotic. And I feel like this is what's happening in the world currently. But there's still a way in which to navigate a path, but it is about things like creativity and well-being, generosity and kindness, and really looking to these really positive human attributes that we all value, that we all want to emulate and be, but actually putting some real work and some real money behind actually doing that stuff. You know, this is all eminently possible, but rather than, you know, sticking on the narrative of taking the mickey out of the hippies for saying, you know, it's all about peace, love and understanding, man, but it sort of is.
So you're going to re-establish their reputation.
Absolutely.
The sharp end of all this is, we should come back to, because you mentioned it very honestly, is poverty. And we are one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. We have some of the poorest electoral wards in the whole of Western Europe. And we have heartbreaking, crushing experiences of poverty. And we have a population in the post-industrial areas who have seen massive hemorrhaging of jobs.
Yeah.
A place like Ebbw Vale and Blaenau Gwent, you know, end of the 60s, when we got 11,000 jobs in steel and tin, 5,000 in coal, gone, all gone. No volume replacement. What's the way we can anchor creativity and inclusion in the traditional forms of work value that people had? I mean, you know, people are talking about the universal wage and stuff like that to help people get by, but how do we create a sense of social connection if there's no work?
Again, I think the participatory democracy has got a place in that as well. It's about giving, you know, it's about giving people meaning and purpose. If they feel that there is a point to what they're doing, then it just starts to raise everybody up. You're part of a community, you're part of a bigger picture, there's a communal goal, you're supported within that by other people. It's, you know, it's important to everybody that you're doing well in order for you to play your part in whatever process it is that you're trying to achieve. You know, in terms of, you know, the idea of, you know, green energy and some sort of Green New Deal, you know,
the new green economy. Yeah.
Exactly. Wales could have a huge part in that, in terms of the power we could create. We've got a huge amount of wind power. I think in Wales, it's like, we're like the second most windy place.
and not just hot air in the shade.
The second most windy place in Europe. So there's a lot, and we've got loads of water. Which is going to become really important in the next couple of decades. So I think, again, we go to these principles which are quite, I think, very deep within Welsh people as well, of nature. I think we are quite close to nature. Sort of the ancient culture of Wales is very natural and naturalistic. So I think that we need to, and this is what I'm talking about, in a way we haven't been completely industrialized. Do you know what I mean? We're all of those, lots of countries that have gone way ahead of us in terms of the economy and being able to create money, but making these big, ugly, you know, a lot of the time, cities and I think in a way, because Wales has lagged behind so much, that might help us in the future, actually, in a way. So I think it's about understanding what we need as opposed to what we want, because they're two different things. And what we need is very little, really. So in our homeschool group, which it currently is, one of the first things the kids have done is made a scavenger list. So everything that we resource, all the resources we need, go through this scavenger list. So it's, can we make it? Can we mend it? Can we forage it? Can we grow it? Can we borrow it? Can we get it from family? Can we get it from charity shops? And then if we have to buy it, okay, how do we ethically source it? Let's look at each company and which companies are more ethical or you know, align with our own values, ending all the way with Amazon.
Yeah.
But I think that we should start, and in a way, this is about embedding creativity in the process. If we are thinking as a nation, all right, what do we want to be? And what do we need in order to be that? And let's be really smart with the little amount of resources that we have. Let's really use what we have and look at our strengths. Do you know what I mean? So that we can be very ergonomic and adaptable.
Last question to you before I open it up to the floor. I mean, I don't want to over-individualise this. This is about big issues. But you've had a lot of knocks.
Yeah.
And you've seen the worst that press and celebrity culture can do to people. Listening to you, you have extraordinary buoyancy and hopefulness.
Yeah.
What's kept that alive?
People. I think that I've got a slightly skewed view of the world because people are really lovely to me. I mean, and the press weren't, and I was a bit of a douchebag when I was a teenager, so people weren't so nice to me then, and I wasn't so nice, to be honest. But, yeah, people, and Welsh people a lot, because I've lived in Wales all my life, so whenever I'm out and about, people are so lovely to me that, yeah, I just have a real love of humanity. I think humans are wonderful. Small humans are my favourite. I think children are incredible in their optimism and their perception of things, of the world. But that's why I think I've remained positive and optimistic, and that I haven't completely malfunctioned. I mean, it is in part as well due to my family, who are amazing and mental and hard, and they've made me really resilient because of the experiences we've had together. But I think I've just got a real, it sounds super cheesy, but I've just got a real love for humanity, and I really think that we're worth saving. And I really find it sort of, in some ways, personally upsetting that people are hurting so much. People are struggling so much when, you know, there's so many ways to see the wonder in the world and feel the connection with other people. We know the cures, and we know the things to do to make people feel better. We just need to implement them.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open this to the floor now, and please ask questions in the language of your choice. We have translation facilities here. So yn hapus clywed cwestiynau yng Nghymraeg. So, any questions for Charlotte? I'm sure there are many interesting ones I haven't asked. I can see Justin Lewis there who wants to ask you a question.
You talked about selling the story of Wales, which, you know, when you travel internationally, you just realise how little people know about Wales, and creativity is an obvious thing to sell around Wales. Is there a way we can do that, though, that isn't sort of just using the kind of traditional communications routes? Is there a way we can do that that's actually innovative and creative in itself, so that so the medium and the message become the same thing, so that we're telling a story of creativity to the world in a way that's incredibly creative, so people think, ooh, that's really worth listening to?
I mean, absolutely. So with the school that I'm building, we want to make it the most creative place in the world. Why not? And everything that we produce as a school, as a faculty, whether it's, you know, information newsletters to the kids, all the stuff that the kids create, anything we present to the world, we want it to be the most creative thing, as creative as we possibly can, as informative and wonderful and wondrous. And there absolutely are ways to do that. I think a lot of it is about asking young people. They've got it in spades. And asking artists to collaborate with people, to give, so rather than maybe always going to graphic designers or people who work within the field, is that again you're making it more of a community project where people can work with artists and graphic designers or animators or, you know, all sorts of different artistic people in order to help tell the story, but again, make it of the people.
Sounds like a great project. When do we start?
But presumably you think, Justin, that specialists need to be innovative too. It's not just the people, as it were.
Yeah, and I guess you need both. I mean, you need those, I guess, kind of communication skills. They're important as well. But I think you're right. If there's a way of doing it where you get creatives involved in a way that allows us to think about doing that in a way that's completely new and completely different, then it's such a powerful way of doing it then.
So we all need to be bolder.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Please put your hand up if you want to ask a question. I can see you then. Yes, in the front here. The mic is coming to you.
Hi, Charlotte. I know that you have personal experience that music transforms lives. So I wanted to ask, how do we give greater voice, choice and access to music education for all young people in Wales? And in particular, what can young people and their families do?
I think the way that you do it is you make it relevant. So again, rather than it being about what adults think children should learn in music, so whether it's, you know, old folk songs or, you know, this song from a musical which is horrifically uncool, you need to make it relevant. You need to embed the relevancy to the children. So if they want to do an Ariana Grande song, there's no reason why you can't have other musicians and people coming in who can make that into an incredible 5-part harmony, which, you know, you can arrange for a band, but you are making it really relevant to them, to inspire them to want to be a part of it. Because actually, music is absolutely essential, I think, for survival. I think it's really, I think we've forgotten as a species how central that is to our experience and our well-being and our happiness. And yes, I think it does have transformative powers, but it's also quite difficult. You know, to learn an instrument, it's quite hard. You need to be patient. It's longitudinal. It's not, you know, but also with music. Music, I think, is the only topic that covers all of the areas of learning at once. So you've got like visual and kinesthetic and all of the different areas of learning. Music is the only thing that hits all of them. So if we increase music in schools, generally all of the other maths, English, science, everything else goes up because it's really good for the brain. So I think that we have to, as adults, work harder on how creative we are in terms of making it relevant for them. So first of all, it's to notice. Well, it's to ask. It's to ask and then truly listen to them about what they want to do, what music they love, what's in, you know, what they feel comfortable being a part of. Because especially with singing, it's difficult, especially for boys. They're like, oh God, so cool. But you know, you make it a Skepta song, which then you can arrange, and you know, you've got some of the boys beatboxing possibly, and all of a sudden they're starting the process.
And it's that huge diversity point that you made, which is absolutely central to what we're trying to fund. We are determined to break into communities that are not being reached by the arts at present in sufficient amounts, and to open up opportunities. And that diversity of expression is going to be crucial. But I think I love your point about patience, because along with that huge sense of invitation and co-creation, we do have to expect things of people. We have to say, if you're going to get good at this, it's going to take some work. Because you did learn that at that cathedral school.
Yeah.
You were badly treated by a lot of your peers, but you learned discipline.
Yeah.
I don't mean that kind of discipline.
I think I learned discipline from the world of work. Like, you know, I was working hard from 12, and yeah, and that's sort of where I became quite disciplined, and you know, and I wanted to do well. Like, I really wanted to perform well in the places where I was, so I'd really work hard at it. But also, again, because the level that I was allowed, that I was afforded, the sort of level of expertise that I was entering, I was working with masters, you know, composers and musicians, and so I think all of the one of the things that we're really trying to do again within the school, and I think is really important in education, is these real world outcomes that often, and if we expect this new curriculum to work, we need to not have it so much in an artificial environment. So, for instance, so my daughter last year in year 6, you know, one of the exercises was write to a Victorian factory owner about the living and working conditions, and it's like, well, what's the point? Do you know what I mean? And I think kids see through that very quickly, rather than, you know, okay, well, let's research Nike. You know, let's have a look at, you know, some of these modern
oppressive factory conditions,
which essentially have child slaves, and start a petition or write to, you know, do some research to find out who these people are and then try and change it. Sorry, I've gone way off topic.
No, it all comes from education. So,
yeah.
So any more questions? Any more questions? Yes, there's a couple at the back. One there and one there.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hiya.
How can we get the creative sector in Wales to communicate the urgency of this climate crisis effectively and fast that contends with corporate marketing?
I was speaking to a couple of people yesterday who are from the Cambridge Conservation Institute, and they, along with the Smithsonian in Washington since 2017, have had this Earth Optimism Day. So what we tend to find is that lots of messages about climate change are embedded with fear. And you know, and it's sort of, in a way, it's sort of necessary, and, you know, people are feeling like this is very urgent, and you know, this stuff needs to be done now. However, we know cognitively that when you do that to people, they sort of switch off and become a bit apathetic about it. So I think that we need to start implementing what we know about the brain and neuroscience and cognition and how people work, and start, you know, using that information, as politicians do with all this data gathering and whatnot, to be able to put forth these really important messages of, you know, here's what we need to do, here's how we do it, this is how you get involved. It needs to be a lot more, this is going to be great fun. You know, let's save the world, guys, rather than, we've got to save the world, it's burning! You know, it's got to be like, oh, a challenge. Challenge, Annika. Let's go. Save the world. Yeah, and I think creatives have a big part to play in that. And we can use all of the formats available to us. But yeah, I think we just need to slightly change the messaging.
There's a really interesting area of thinking now about playfulness, isn't there? And the danger of losing playfulness from our human interactions is what we've just been hearing about. One last question, because we're running out of time.
Hi, I'm a secondary school art teacher in Cardiff, and the thing that I find really difficult is seeing kids come through from year 6 into year 7 in secondary school, and seeing them kind of say that they're not creative because they've been told that they're not creative. Do you think that this is something that needs to be changed, you know, much lower, you know, so that in future life they actually realise that creativity is so much more than just music lessons and that just art lessons? I just wonder what you think of that.
I think it's essential, absolutely, that we start to change the definition around what creativity is. As I was saying earlier, creativity is absolutely everything that we ever do, in my mind, and so there is constant opportunity to be as creative as you want. I could try and, you know, make up a poem on the spot right now and it'd be really creative, but even just, you know, the way that I'm speaking, it's an act of creation. Everything that we do, what our, you know, what events that we plan, what parties we have, how our house looks. You know, there's so many opportunities for creativity, and we should be teaching our young people that the same stuff, that it isn't just about the arts, but also I think it is a little bit tricksy with that age group, because they are going through such huge changes in the brain. So what we thought of as just sort of hormones, what we know now is that actually the brain is going through some crazy processes of pruning neurons and synaptic connections and completely sort of remodeling the brain. And so I think there is a very natural drop-off between that imagination and play, and then they get a bit more self-conscious and, oh, I can't do that, and I'm not expressing. So I do think that's part of a natural process as well. But even through that, you know, there's ways. Again, it's about making it relevant, making it relevant to their experience, that, you know, they don't want to do the playful, childish, imagination things, which, you know, at that point they think are babyish, but it's about making it really relevant to their experience. And at that time, for all teenagers, no matter where you live, you might live in the most rural, idyllic place, but, you know, they think that they're hard up, their life is gritty and edgy and street. Do you know what I mean? That's the general sort of teenage path. That's a pretty big generalisation, but just to always make it relevant, and the only way that we can make it relevant is by truly listening to them.
It's a good way to end. Brothers and sisters in Welsh society, many thanks for coming today, but above all, I think we owe a huge expression of our gratitude and thanks to this remarkable woman who has delighted and amazed us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have talked about arts and culture and creativity and well-being and health. She is suffering today and has been suffering for about a week. So we are delighted that she has been with us today and given us so much to think about. Diolch am ddod. Thanks very much for coming.
Diolch.